Hi, everybody.
Oh my gosh. Hello.
I know, we're live streaming. What is this? We haven't been on here in like 2 or 3 weeks.
I was
Ugh.
enjoying my nap.
Yeah. Been on a little hiatus myself. I haven't really made any content or anything. Just taking some, mental time off.
I think the biggest irony is that we've been off for, 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. And I think we got this stream prepared. Well, you got it prepared, by last night?
By an hour ago. Maybe a little bit more. At least by 3 o'clock.
Only the best for our viewers.
Right? You guys are that important. But, yeah, we're here. We're live. We're doing the podcast thing. So,
what's rule number 1? No expectations?
Yeah, exactly. So if you walked up in here with expectations, it's your own fault. You should have read the rules. There's 11 very thoughtful, very planned out rules down in the description. You guys should have read them. Just saying. But anyway, so talking about some time off, I'm going to kind of go into some housekeeping. So we're going to kind of move the stream around a little bit. So here in the future, I should be getting some pretty baller internet. And when that happens, stream is going to move location to my house. And because I'll have, of course, a better connection, a little bit better setup to be able to do this.
And you're getting tired of being almost mugged by that creature you can't quite find. Hiding under that stack of pizza boxes over there, I think.
It's not that bad. He's nice. I've talked to him a few times, but yeah, mainly it's just a little more convenient. I can leave my stuff set up. I don't have to come invade John's apartment and
That's the only visitors I get.
and make him clean up the house and straighten up. So
Curtis said that's apparent.
So it's just mainly out of convenience. Also, probably till we get that situation figured out, we're going to be moving to bi-weekly on the podcast here. This gives us a little bit more time to plan. I'm going to be a little busy here in the next couple months. I got vacation coming up and whole bunch of other stuff, so that's mainly just to help me not pull my hair out so much. But yeah, hence the YouTube hiatus. But yeah, we're here, we're live, and let's get started here.
Oh.
So,
You want me to start this off?
Yeah.
Kick it off?
Kick us off, John.
First, I'm going to open this. Pretty sure this is
I'm
one
going
I
to
threw over the
move
floor.
the iPad over. Which, by the way, if you're watching this, please notice the brand new cables for the microphone A's, as I forgot the cables and I had to run to the local music store and pick up cables because I don't have a brain. But anyway, so what's our first tidbit,
right.
John?
Our first tidbit.
Oh boy, it's going to be a good one.
Our first tidbit is, did you see how that didn't spill at all?
I'm impressed.
All right? You tap the side of the can.
In case
For all you kids at home.
the people listening that can't see this, John put a can up on the ledge and didn't spill a drop.
Oh, that's not what I meant. I meant after I kicked that can around the floor for a little bit.
Oh, okay.
I opened it,
you.
and it didn't foam over at all.
Nice. Good job, John.
I also managed to put it on the ledge. So
Yeah, good job.
yeah, I'm improving as a human. So, Game of Thrones is, I'm gonna read this just like it's written. Game of Thrones is pulling some heartstrings with the latest episode as it rapidly approaches the series finale.
Yep, Game of Thrones coming to an end. It'll be here before we know it. And then I can finally sit down and watch the whole series.
I think I read an article that said something like, or at least came by an article that said something like, the last episode set up some really heartfelt characters, or moments.
Yep.
So pretty sure know what's coming next episode.
Apparently there's a big battle coming up, and a lot of people are going to get whacked, and mafia style whacked. So, yeah. And Speaking of things constantly dying, I wrote that segue for myself. I'm popular. But Mortal Kombat 11 released, and it's just as gory and bloody as ever. And I watched my favorite streamer play through it, and man, that story mode is super cheesy, which Mortal Kombat never really known for its great storyline. It was like it was released first and then they wrote the story later.
Yeah.
And you feel it, but it seems like a good game. Mechanically it's pretty sound. And it's pretty cool to see how the game has evolved and changed over the ages. So, yeah. Oh, wait. I wrote that one for myself, too.
Yep.
Okay. So, Mortal Kombat isn't the only piece of retro gaming that is evolving into the future. So,
that
Sega
wasn't forced in the slightest.
No, it was not. I am a robot. But Sega Genesis Mini is slated for release September 19th of this year. And it was confirmed to include 40 games. Pretty curious to see what comes out on that. We've talked a little bit about this before when they initially I don't know if it was a leak or a teaser. They said that they were making it, but it's confirmed. It's going to release in September. And yeah, a lot of good titles on that console. Slowly picking some up as, we just got a Sega system not that long ago. So, yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that won't be on the Genesis Mini, though. Thanos.
Thanos.
Ugh, well, it's awful.
Oh, you ruined the segue.
I ruined
I worked so hard on that segue, and you ruined it.
I see you put your whole heart into it.
I did put my whole heart into that.
Which Avengers Endgame actually hit the $1.2 billion mark globally.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, it was something like
their international.
$300 million in the U.S. And,
what do you happen to know? Obviously, that shattered some records there. Do you happen to know what the last highest grossing?
I want to say it was Captain Marvel, but don't quote me on that.
So they just keep topping themselves at this point?
Yeah. Kevin down in the chat, did you go to Stage Sound? No, buddy. I went to Kelly's Music. I didn't have time for Stage Sound, plus it was closed. So had to go to Kelly's and overpay for microphone cables. Yeah. Nah.
Okay. Well, speaking of awful segues, Nintendo... Here's a non-existent one. Nintendo pulls indie games. Yeah, that's right. Nintendo just pulled a indie game from the Switch eShop due to an Easter egg it included. The game was called A Dark Room, which is actually it was a text adventure style game. It was something that was a bit unique. The idea is you start off in a pitch black room, I think. And then as the game's story unfolds a little bit, the game starts to open up a bit.
Neat.
However, there was a Ruby interpreter and a code editor included in the game's files, which Ruby is a programming language.
Yep.
Yeah. And with that interpreter and editor, you would be able to create your own apps. It's a high enough language you'd be able to create your own apps with it, I guess.
Yeah, your own custom
on the
apps
Switch without actually hacking into the Switch interface.
And you'd be able to execute apps. So
yeah.
So in cometh the bloatware if the wrong people get their hands on that and are able to pass it through Nintendo.
So maybe it's a good thing that they took it down.
Yeah, I mean that is a pretty sizable leak. Like I understand that people want to make their games for consoles and stuff like that, but you don't want to give people who don't know what they're doing access to that
Yeah.
sort of thing. So
Well, and to be fair, I mean, nobody that didn't know what they were doing would likely be able to utilize that
yeah,
software.
true.
In fact, the only reason they even found it, or at least the reason that it was found, is because the programmer of the game a couple weeks after was like, "Hey, I put this Easter egg in here." I don't know.
Hey guys. Yeah.
I have no idea why you would do that, but yeah, because of that they pulled the game. So if you were planning on getting that for the Switch, a Dark Room, at least as of now, that's not a possibility anymore.
She gone. Should have already got it. Well, I wonder if you already had it downloaded, if it would pull it off of your game list.
I was wondering that too. I would doubt it, but at the same time, I can't.
Man, that would kind of suck. I would hope they would at least like refund your money or
They
something.
would have to. That would be.
There'd be an uproar.
Yeah.
But I have no idea how much the game was. But even if it was $5, I'd be ticked. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, it really doesn't matter.
yeah.
Because no matter what, the consumer didn't do anything wrong here, so they shouldn't be penalized.
Exactly. But on the topic of things getting pulled out, John Petty.
My dad, not soon enough.
And we went there. All right.
Well, if you're gonna put it that way.
Yep. I mean, I set myself up for that. Story of my life. But John Petty research claims that 20 million PC gamers will switch to console over the next year. Over the next few years. I left out a word there. Extreme Tech, who is if you want to call it journalism or forum site or something like that, chalks this up to the growing technological and graphics enhancements with newer consoles that allow players to simply play their favorite titles and stream movies all from one box, which the PC guy inside of me is screaming at this because you can do the exact same thing on PC.
I don't understand this, because the idea too would be is that PC gamers would be pulling out to go to consoles.
Yeah.
They would already understand the fact that
Yeah. I think this is just kind of
maybe
bloat.
simply is the key word there, but even so, I don't know. It sounds
stupid.
Sounds
it doesn't make any
sensationalist.
sense. If anything, I think PC owners are going to buy newer consoles and still have their PCs and still play their PC games.
If there's one reason to, if there's one reason to buy consoles if you're a PC gamer, it's simply because they're exclusive titles you can't get your hands on. But
yeah, like I used to be really, really sad I couldn't play my Forza and my Halo. Well, thanks to Windows 10, I can do that on my PC. So, oh well. But yeah, I don't know. I think that's kind of fluff. I don't think that's really going to amount to 20 million people ditching their PCs for consoles.
I'd be kind of shocked. If anything, I kind of thought that the movement was headed the other way. I don't know.
Yeah.
Of course, my research is based on nothing, so.
Yeah, I didn't look too far into this one just because I was like, I don't know about that.
Well, we'll try to keep an eye out for that then.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if my Steam friend list starts to dwindle down, I'll know something's up. But so yeah, consoles are the only.
Are not the only.
Man, I should not do these when I'm tired.
Here, I'll segue for you. Consoles aren't the only industry that is growing. Tabletop games are too.
Sorry, headphone users. I just blew your ears out.
Sorry, not sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Rip. But yeah, so John Olin, you may or may not know this name. Maybe if you're truly a geek, you know it. But he is the guy from Wizards of the Coast. So they are the ones who run D&D. They're the ones who do Magic the Gathering. Big, popular, tabletop titles. So they are actually going to be opening up a new location in Austin, Texas. And the article was talking about how he hired a veteran or I don't know if the article didn't specify. I don't know if he is a military veteran or if he is a veteran to the tabletop world. I would assume the tabletop world. But the office is going to be ran by this gentleman. And honestly, the new location isn't really surprising. I mean, tabletop is growing pretty rapidly. I mean, thanks to programs like Critical Role and things like that, podcasts such as, Inglorious Bards, Drunks and Dragons, stuff like that. People are starting to get into D&D. I myself, John, you just got your book in. You're going to be rolling in our campaign before long.
And we were having this conversation a little bit too, just a little bit ago. It always seems like every once in a while there's just this surge in consumption of nerd culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of big when D&D first started and it died down. And then I remember a time when I was a bit younger, I think that it popped up a little bit again.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are again. Sundering Geek have been running their channel for a while here. Yeah. You see all these superhero movies are back in the limelight again.
Yeah, and it's definitely cultural right now. And I think a lot of it is due to the fact that this sort of thing was very voodoo in culture. Like, oh, look at this Dungeons and Dragons nerd over here. Yeah. I mean, it just wasn't something you really talked about with people out in public.
To the point where, in the same way where they made movies about marijuana, like what's the classic there?
Which one?
The one damning it. The black and white. What's one? In the 70s? Oh, it's a classic. I can't even.
I don't know.
Oh, that's a mistake. Anyway.
But mainly.
But the point is, they produced films. I think there was a film of Mazes and Monsters, maybe.
Oh, I don't know that one.
With Tom Hanks.
Perhaps. No clue. But
yeah, it did the same thing that these films did. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and
is that it took a very extreme look at this kind of content. It was in the same way where Harry Potter novels and that were seen as the gateway to witchcraft and that.
Well, not only that,
D&D was seen as a gateway to the dark arts and then.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's so much that.
It really did happen. I'm not lying.
Yeah,
I'm not lying.
I don't doubt that for a bit. I think as far as like modern times goes, I think it's just that our generation is kind of stretching tradition and like remolding it and kind of getting out of the boundaries that, we're seen as stupid or dorky, like video games, D&D, superheroes, things like that. They're becoming more commonplace, which is exciting. I love to see tradition kind of, get broken up.
Yeah. And the other part of it is that no matter how niche your group is, because of the internet, all these groups have gotten so much larger than they once were.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pretty cool stuff to see. I'm excited. I just got into D&D. I hope a lot more people do. We actually just got... So we've slowly been getting these game stores that will have stuff like Warhammer and tables set up for D&D and stuff like that. We've been getting them here and there.
Which, again, in my youth, I would have been your youth too, but they were actually fairly popular. I don't know if you remember how big Star City Games was back then.
Yeah, they're actually still... I think it's the world's #1 Magic the Gathering store.
They ended up dropping a lot of product too.
Yeah. I actually know a guy that works there.
Yeah.
Yeah, he comes to our men's group. He's pretty cool.
Like, they don't sell comics anymore, or at least they didn't. But comics have come back around again.
Yeah, Because it used to be Star City Comics.
Yeah.
Was the name
They
of
sold
it.
everything. They sold comics. They sold video games. They sold board games, cards.
Yeah.
Um,
Pretty cool stuff. But
It's
yeah,
interesting.
we just got a new location. It's called Blades. And we played D&D there one time, and it was so cool. It was such a good atmosphere. Like, the building's decorated very, very... just kind of that culture. I mean, there's a big painting of a dragon up on the wall, and big wooden tables, stuff like that, and it was just pretty neat. Like, you go in, everybody has the same passion you do, and you can be loud and boisterous and like really get into character and stuff, and nobody pays you any mind because they're doing it too, and it's pretty cool.
Nerds unite.
Cool. Nerds unite. Got to touch rings.
Shape of
Shape of, I don't know.
my virginity still intact.
Oh, jeez. But yeah, so now that we've talked about D&D and everything else, I guess it's time to slide on into the main topic here.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Grr.
So,
Which is
censorship,
in game.
which we have been lacking in this podcast. It's all good. We're not quite we're not adult only rating where we would get shut down on multiple sites, so we're fine. Actually, I think YouTube is a site that shuts down.
I think we're still E+10.
Hey, E for everyone. Except kids.
As long as you're 10.
But yeah, so what we want to talk about is a few kind of main topics. I feel like this is probably the best way to crack into this, because censorship in games, movies, everything, that's something this podcast would be like 40 hours long.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty debated upon topic. A lot of people have very, very strong opinions on both sides, and I'm going to try my best. I do fit on one side of that argument, but I'm going to try my best to kind of play devil's advocate and kind of weigh both sides and see, just where the discussion leads. So what I want to start out with is, in what ways have we noticed censorship in games? So there's been many, as we've talked about in the past. We've been very fortunate in our lives to really catch the broad side of video games evolvement.
Yeah.
And we've seen everything pretty much from SNES up.
Yeah.
So throughout the years, there's been kind of that gray, it's still a gray area in lawmaking. I mean, they really haven't nailed anything down, but we've seen just how that process has shifted. But anyway, so one of the ways I've noticed it, and this one's very, very current with me because I'm currently playing through this game, is Chrono Trigger. So in the very beginning of the game, there's a little mini game you can do to try to impress this girl where it's a soda chugging competition. And you have to mash the button, and Chrono like turns up all these steins of soda. And you try to beat the other guy. Well, later on, you go to pay tribute to this fallen warrior's grave, and he says to bring him a soda. But in the Japanese version, it's sake. I mean, come on, North America. But yeah, just silly little things like that. Also, very beginning of gaming, Ice Climbers. They actually had their own game before Super Smash, where you had to navigate these platforms, and in the North American version, you had to fight off Yetis. But everywhere else in the world, they were seals. So you ran around clubbing seals before it was cool. I know, that's so
Pushing
tasteful.
T.
So tasteful, right? And then, of course, later on, you have the infamous hot coffee.
I apologize to any seals watching.
Right? you have the infamous hot coffee scene from GTA, and I vividly remember this.
That one occurred directly in our
that was like right in that sweet spot.
Gaming time.
And luckily, I didn't have San Andreas. I stopped after Vice City, but yeah, San Andreas. Apparently, there was a way to get a part that was supposed to be removed from the game, in which
a part of the when you're dating a girl, there's a mini game called Hot Coffee, and it was removed, but instead of actually removing the code all the way out, they just took out the initiation into the mini game. So hackers found a way around it.
Yeah. All you had to do was basically tell the game, "Hey, I did the initiation." The game's like, "Oh, okay, cool. Here." And you meet up with your girlfriend and you have some hot, steamy coffee.
With clothes on.
that was the weird part.
It is weird, isn't it?
I guess it was their way to keep it G-rated.
Oh, I think the real reason they took it out is because it's so embarrassing.
They're like, this is cringy. But what were some things that you've noticed?
Well, I guess one point I would make is that actually in the U.S., we've been pretty lucky. Not much gets banned over here. Yeah. Every once in a while you get a... Well, I can't... Not any that I can specifically point at. For the most part, games that are released over here get released. But there are games that were released here that certainly weren't elsewhere. Manhunt 2.
Yeah. I think
Postal
3 as well.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. More than I can name, to be honest.
If you're German and you're watching this podcast, I am so sorry, but your government is a tyrant about video games. Like, it's pretty bad. And it's really weird. Not to hog the mic. I'm sorry to interrupt you. But, so a lot of German games, they end up turning the people into robots. And that's their way around the violence. Like Team Fortress, Carmageddon, some fighter pilot game. I mean, that's
odd. It's interesting. So, actually, games didn't really start pushing that territory, pushing the edge until the 90s. And so we didn't really see that. To the point where there had to be an ERSB rating, which didn't come in until I think Mortal Kombat, arguably, is the first one to cause that to happen. Night Trapped is mentioned among them as well. But
I think it wasn't until around Columbine, because
is that what they played?
Doom or Unreal Tournament. Oh. One of them was the one they played.
Well, Mortal Kombat is what caused the RSB rating.
Okay. I might be mistaken.
It's not the first game to get that much, but I mean, it's the first game where people are like, oh, this needs a rating.
Yeah, we better get on top of this. But
because there was blood and gore all over the arcade version. Yeah. Obviously, in the SNES version, they pulled it out altogether, and in the Genesis version, there was a code that locked it. But
there was it's. I think it still had blood, but the fatalities were locked.
Okay,
I'm thinking that's what it was. Again, I'm pretty new to Genesis, so not an expert. But definitely Mortal Kombat was a big turning point in the censorship side.
And actually, there's an interesting point about that, I think, is that, and I think we're about to jump into this here anyway, but, weirdly enough, comparatively to other, specifically like the film industry, there's that parallel that makes sense. It's so commonplace that over here in the States that sexualization is so shunned, and yet violence is just a nothing. Yeah. You can watch people getting shot up and blown up and cut up on TV, but you're not gonna see anything questionable sexually. No boobies.
They're.
which is it's a given, but it's actually an interesting parallel in games because while it almost seems like it's to two weird extremes, games are even more violent, it seems, than the average film. Arguably because it's not a live action most of the time. I mean, it's computer generated and that. But sex is even further removed from. I don't know if I've actually ever personally seen a game with nudity in it. I'm trying to think it out.
Yeah.
I mean, I may have, but it's so much scarcer than in movies. R-rated movies have at least some nudity all the time. It's still it's lesser than, but
Yeah. I remember, and this is from my darker times, but me and my brother had my dad's. Sorry, I gotta put this up there. I gotta situate. So, me and my brother had my dad's movie rental card, and we rented the Playboy Mansion Sims game on PS2. Got it home and like super nasty. Went to open the instruction manual and like the pages were stuck together, and it was just like, nope, not doing that.
Oh my
but
God.
So
That's the grossest story I've ever heard.
That's nasty. Golly, it was nasty. Like, who does that?
But as I see, you've got some here. I mean, to some degree, see, an R rating to some degree covers nudity in films, but in games, in pretty much you're bound to see boundless amounts of violence. But
Yeah.
if there's any kind of sexualization or nudity to any modicum, really, it's pushed up to an AO, to adults only 18 and up.
Yeah, and
as you have written,
the Playboy game, it had top-up nudity.
okay.
And then one thing that recently went under fire was Devil May Cry 5.
Oh, yeah?
Because when you rescue a certain person in the game, I don't want to spoil it, because that's a fantastic game, but when you rescue them, it's like butt shot. And so I think in Japan they put a big light flare right in the lens of the camera to cover that up.
Yeah, that's.
But I think it was the U.S. game. They left it in there, and it is really strange how that works.
I mean, like you have written, the only games aren't generally well received among game companies. They generally won't publish them, right?
Yeah, so this is a little research that I did, and what I had found that many consoles, especially PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, which are your main three,
Sure.
flat out refuse to publish adult-only or AO ESRB rated games. Now, the difference between AO and M is 17 plus, AO is designated as 18 plus. This is why so many games get toned down to M or 17 plus ratings.
Gotcha.
Agony, this is a game that released a year or two ago where you journey through hell and try to escape. This is a prime example of this because initially it was rated AO. And in order to be published on consoles, they had to tone a bunch of things down. And currently, only PC gamers are able to download a patch that gets them the AO content in the game. Also, Manhunt 2 and 3 both had that AO rating. And in order, of course, to be published, they had to tone it way down. And even then, it's still a very violent game.
Oh, yeah. Incredibly so.
Also, most brick and mortar stores flat out refuse, will not keep AO rated games on their shelves. And also, streaming services like Twitch, I'm pretty sure YouTube, also ban the streaming of adult only games. So when you're a developer and like you want to make a really hardcore game, you want to make something that you don't design it just because it's the most gory, inhumane game ever. You just want to make something extreme. You want to make something edgy. You can't, or else no one would be able to play your game unless you host it on your own website, sort of thing.
And I would devil's advocate argue that it just depends on the content you want to put on it.
Yeah.
You can get away with a lot. I mean, Manhunt 2, just premise alone is a rough game.
Yeah.
And there was a game recently where you, I'm trying to remember the setup, but it was fairly awful. You just went around shooting innocent people, and that was the main. I mean, that was the.
I forgot the name of it. Yeah, you're a guy that's like straight up trench coat, long black hair.
You're a shooter, and that's the point of the game, is just to shoot civilians.
There was also a Columbine game on Steam.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't stop people, but unfortunately, as soon as places like that notice it, they take it down. I mean,
to be absolutely fair though, with that little amount of tax. Oh man, I doubt. I kind of question even the creativity that's there.
Yeah.
But it is a good point. The point still stands.
And does it step on the toes of the developer's creative freedom? Because as a creator, there's this sense of you should be able to create whatever you want. Yeah. And that's the ongoing argument. That's probably the biggest argument.
And like you said, that revolves around pretty much entertainment medium as a whole.
Yeah.
Comedy gets that quite a bit. What's okay to make jokes about? What's not?
And it's hard because as a content creator, I would be very, very upset if YouTube came up to me and was like, hey, you can't release this, you can't sell this, you can't provide this because it classifies as this one designation that's basically outlawed. The catch-22 of that is I would never create content like that.
Yeah.
I would never make a shooting game based off of a horrific incident. I would never,
Well, and the real catch-22 that is that it's their platform.
Yeah.
As much as people like to bitch and moan, YouTube provides you with the service without YouTube, the stream would never get off the ground. It just...
Yeah, and that's why I was saying if people want to make adult-only games, chances are they would just have to release it on their own website.
Right.
Because, I mean, no DRM, no store, no console's going to pick it up. Which means it would be PC only.
Right. Which means the resources to do such a thing is just astronomical and out of...
Well, I mean, it's not so much the resource. It wouldn't cost any more to make strictly a PC game. It's
it's the production of it, though, right?
No, not necessarily. A lot of times, every game starts out as a PC game, and then...
What I mean is in terms of the actual copies, selling out the copies.
Yeah, that's where I was getting. You just wouldn't... Your return on investment would be shot. I mean, you wouldn't be getting paid near what you could if you could branch out to other consoles.
Of course, it's also important to note that it's not just it's not just the hardcore obscenity that gets censored out in video games.
Yeah.
There are things that at their time are considered taboo, even if it's even if something's pretty above board about it and it's more questioning rather than it is. I mean, think the book bans or the book burnings and that, huh?
Yeah.
Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and I can't
Catcher in the Rye.
I can't remember which country it is. I think it's It's gonna drive me insane. Anyway, Venezuela. Venezuela, because they've got crazy government stuff going on right now. If you're caught with a banned video game, you face jail time. Like, I mean, there's severe consequences. Other countries, they're gathering up banned games from stores or, whatever's turned in, and they destroy them, just like book burnings. I mean...
But so the content at the time, though, that would be considered risque, the stuff you'd find in Catcher in the Rye.
I see where
it's really not considered that way now. But that's kind of the point, is that what we censor is subjective.
Absolutely.
And thus censorship as a whole is subjective, and thus what should be censored and what shouldn't be is completely up to perspective, to whoever's in charge to make such decisions, which is why sometimes there are pushes for things to be censored that not everybody agrees about. Not everybody finds obscene. What's obscene is up to the individual.
Yeah.
You've had all these pushes recently of various things throughout time through games. The most recent, I would think, would be the charges of games being objectifying women to such large degrees.
PlayStation's cracking down on that. Lot of consoles. I mean, they're covering the girls up. They and part of that is and I hate it because people refer to it as the Me Too culture, which I don't agree with. I think there's seriously an issue going on here. And the Me Too culture is referring to people who are abusing it. Whereas, they're trying to protect this culture in which, women have been objectified through media, stuff like that. They're just trying to clean up their act. Stop having all these, anime games with the girls all in bikinis and fighting and stuff, which... Be completely honest, I don't care. I don't play those games. I don't play Dead or Alive. I'm not the one that's spending $1,000 in DLC bikinis. If you want that, just play your Dead or Alive.
Since we're here,
oh boy, it's gonna get good now.
Not really. Oh, it's just political, but I think we've already breached that line. Yeah, I don't know. As a guy, as a male gamer, in the time and place that we are now, it's really weird. It's really hard to take any sort of side because you can see the points about censorship and you can see the points about people feeling oppressed or feeling assaulted in a sense. It's not a great choice of words here. Feeling I don't know, their boundaries have been stepped over.
I don't know what word you're searching for.
But that feel wronged, simply put. And it's easy to see both sides. Part of the problem is that both sides tend to have such extreme voices there that it's much easier to just shrink down and hug the middle.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is people have a hard time with the fact that you don't get to choose what makes other people upset. So I think that's where a lot of arguments start, is they see the other person's point as stupid, or okay Siri, you can go away now. They see the other person's point as pointless, right. that it holds no value. Just don't be a dick. That's the main thing.
If you believe you're right, which most people tend to do, because otherwise why would you believe in anything?
Why would you debate?
then it's hard to believe that other people could possibly be right too, or even in the very least that other people have the right to hold on to the opinions they have, even if they're opposite of yours. So you people tend to dismiss anyone that doesn't share the same opinion that they do.
Yeah.
And also, of course, the loudest, the most extreme tend to be the loudest. So
Yeah.
So it's always hard to tell where everyone's at.
Yeah. And to to kind of bring us back towards the topic. So does it step on a developer's creative freedom? And not only the developers, but does it help the consumer, not with their freedom, but with, being respectful towards the consumer? ESRB, big joke. Big joke. That is the stupidest system that has ever been implemented. I'm not agreeing with it, but I've been playing Grand Theft Auto since well before I should have been. I've been playing Mortal Kombat since, before I could probably even spell it. And just, it's a failed system. It's a system that I feel like should be taken out of place and reconsidered. And
I would argue that that's why people always say, well, why are we even having this censorship? That's what the ESRB is for. But for one, I think there's still a stigma that games are for kids, and I think that's still pretty well. And part of that is because kids can more or less get their hands on anything, especially if you've got a parent or have a friend who has parents that aren't particularly close about watching what their kids consume, and thus that's why people go on these tirades to have things banned or prohibited or removed. Is because the rating systems only work when people follow them.
Yeah. When the people aren't able to govern themselves, that's when government steps in to take care of the situation. Personally, that's not really where I stand with that, but that's kind of what's been happening. Parents aren't watching their kids' media. This is why you have Momo trying to kill your kids and stuff like that, because parents are just like, oh, it's Peppa Pig, it's probably fine. Which, granted, I know the situation before you start yelling at me in comments or anything like that. That was a very, very isolated incident. I know that. But the principle still stands that you need to be watching what your kids are intaking. You don't feed them junk food in hopes that, they stay a healthy weight and are like healthy individuals. You feed them good stuff to make sure that their bodies are healthy. So why not watch what your kids are intaking so that way you know what's going on in their head isn't conflicting with your parenting. So like if they're watching violent videos where people are fighting and arguing and stuff like that, there's no amount of parenting you can do to prevent them from having some sort of conflict with it. Just because, kids are sponges, man. And that's where a majority of this argument stems from. We got to protect the kids. And yeah.
And how can we do that in the most hands-off way possible?
Yeah.
That's how this thing always seems to come up.
Yep. It's like you get...
And the answer is always the same. If you want to protect your kids, you have to protect your kids.
Yep. For sure.
And some are going to fall through the cracks.
Not every egg can be a winner, but...
Although it's true.
Yeah. But, so, next point is, does censorship take away some of the greatness that a game has or could have had? Again, this is kind of opinion-based. There's going to be people that are like, censorship is bad, censorship is wrong, it shouldn't be in games, it shouldn't be in music, shouldn't be in media. So, do I feel like it takes away from what a game has or does not have? I feel like depending on what the content is and how it's censored, like some countries you're not allowed to see the bottoms of feet. So like just weird stuff like that I feel like is silly and pointless. But then again, I'm not part of that culture. Yeah.
Censorship is all about protecting people from the obscene.
Yeah.
And again, it just boils down to what is and what isn't obscene. And that's always cultural. Because to some people, nothing's obscene. But we don't live in a world where there's no standards. So, in a society where there's no standards. So, there's always going to be... But because there's such a variety of what the standards, the perception of what the standards are and should be, these kind of arguments will never, ever end.
No, never. So, why are games censored then? Is it just because of the children? Is every single campaign advertises? I don't think it's not for the kids. It's for the kids, but it's not for the kids because no one gives a crap enough to enforce anything.
It's for the parents of the kids that the companies are scared will sue them. Will bring the hammer down upon them.
In the U.S., it's to dodge liability.
Yeah.
That's the only reason it exists. In other countries like China, it's either because it's hurting the mindset they want their children to have or their viewpoint of the government. Other places, it's that, this game is too violent. There's too much blood. There should be no human on human violence unless it's, attack like war or something. Just different viewpoints like that. Games. Here's. Man, do I get into this?
I don't know.
Because I kind of feels like it ties into the last point, which is...
I'll say, well, looking at what you've got, it looks like we're basically about done here. So why don't you bring it out and wrap it with your point here?
Is censoring games wrong? In my current situation, in my country, censoring games is not wrong. It's just not implemented properly. I do believe that there needs to be some form of censorship, but it needs to fall on both sides of the consumer and the government. The government needs to inform that these games may not be suitable, but the parents and, the consumer needs to know that ultimately their money is what's going to be purchasing this game. So the government can inform all they want, but unless you take the proper steps to actually censor yourself from the game and not buy it, it's just empty words. I don't believe in the censorship of books. I don't believe in the censorship of music. And honestly, even TV. So video games, I would have to kind of fall on that side of... It sounds totally contradictory. But I'm going to say games should not be censored.
Personally, I don't believe in censorship in the terms that I just don't personally believe in it. I believe that information should be accessed, good or bad. That being said, I also understand that not everybody thinks that way.
Yeah.
That there are standards, and especially as a parent, if you have standards for what you think your children should be viewing, it's really always up to you. And granted, sometimes you can't always control what your kids do and what happens, but it's always up to you as a parent to enforce the standards you believe in. And thus, it's up to you as a parent to know what your kid is watching. Like you mentioned before, or playing or whatever is interacting with. Like you mentioned before, if you just stick something up, if you just stick something up on YouTube, which is something I've seen more and more here, and you think it's fine, you have no idea, and you haven't seen the video, you have no idea what to expect.
Yeah.
And and kids are always ever more capable with technology than their parents. So especially if you give them reins to something like YouTube and you leave the room, you have no idea where they'll end up.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that ends up on YouTube Kids that shouldn't be there, mainly just because the algorithm has failed. And allowed something to be put on there that shouldn't be.
And see, the natural response is for people to get upset by that, to find this thing and say, how dare you let this through? This is your fault. But see, that's part of the issue, is that people are very reactive in nature, and that people are always trying to pass the buck. They never expect blame. They never accept blame, and they always want to blame somebody for some reason. I have no idea, but anyway, the point though is that while the government may be responsible for regulating entertainment to some degree, and I think that's fair, it's ultimately up to the consumer to make whatever regulations they deem. It's like you said, it's not all on the government. It's men and women and everyone. Everyone needs to step up and be responsible for themselves. And take some responsibility.
I want to clarify something, because earlier that probably made zero sense, and it probably super contradicted what I was saying. So, culture would have it, there should be censorship. There should be work on both sides of the fence, from government to the consumer. That is what I was referring to when I said there should be censorship. I personally kind of stand on John's side and say that if you don't want your kid watching porn, don't let them watch porn. If you don't want them playing a violent video game, don't let them play a violent video game. Same thing in music. If there's a dirty rap station, don't complain to the radio station so they censor every other word. Just don't listen to that station. This applies directly with video games. And I understand if there's no rating system, it can be hard to kind of identify and be like, man, is this a good game or is this a bad game? But we do have some sort of a system in place. It's just people don't use it. There's one more point I was going to make, and I've totally spaced out. Oh, I hate when that happens. Oh, come on, brain. Is it gone? Is it gone? Is it gone?
And it's gone.
It's not gone yet. I could pull it. I could pull it out of there.
We'll just stick that in the hedge fund, and it's gone.
Man, what was it?
Trying to think if there's anything I can add while you're trying to rack your brain.
Dang it. I hate when that happens. But, yeah, there shouldn't be censorship. The creator should be able to make whatever they want to make. I agree that some things may be in bad taste, but don't play them.
And of course, what folks worry about is things like, just because that's the case doesn't mean kids won't get their hands on it, which is true.
Absolutely.
But then again, there's very little you can do to control what kids can and can't get their hands on. And when you block them here, they'll go here. Yeah. It's very much in the nature of children to find information. It's what they're meant to do, is to grow. Yeah. And that includes all kinds of information, even the stuff you'd rather them not intake. They're going to find a way to intake it.
Yeah. And it's not.
And there's no reason that there shouldn't be standards in place to regulate that. But at the same time, at some degree, at some point, it's just no matter what's done, there's gonna be a way through the cracks. So the best way to keep your kids away from those kind of materials is for you yourself as a parent to try and keep them away from those materials, not to hope that the government will do it for you, because the likelihood is they won't even be able to.
Yeah, when the government has to parent your children, that's when they end up in jail as adults.
Wow. Oh, I do love my video games.
And I'm not saying, like, if you're the perfect parent...
My video game talk.
Yeah, I'm not saying, like... And I'm trying to stray away from kids to mainly adults. Like I said, I try to keep my language fairly clean. I don't drop the F-bomb like every other sentence,
right.
Especially out in public. You know, I try to keep my channel relatively clean just because I don't enjoy watching that content where it's just like F-bomb, 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 F-bomb. And it's just like, I feel like you can be creative, you can be expressive, but you don't have to be crude in a way to do it. It's kind of like comedy. I mean, really, really like raunchy, terrible comedy. Like, yeah, it could be funny, but after 5 minutes, it gets kind of stale. However, you have the guy that's just legitimately clever and has these topics that he can pop off, and it's just like, man, I relate to that. That's really funny. He's going to be the funnier one.
Well, and I'd argue
not
that
your Larry the Cable Guy or Ron White.
I would argue that it's possible to have wit even while having obscenity.
Yeah.
Personally, I think South
It's
Park...
in your execution.
For example, I think South Park does it all the time. But at the same time, South Park is a highly contested show.
Yeah.
That's a show that's received condemnation all the time.
Yeah.
And it's natural, and as it should be. But I think some censorship is natural. Censorship in the sense that regulating what you have access to makes some sense, but it should be how can I put this? It's what you choose. This is kind of where you were working on earlier. It's what you choose. It makes sense that things you don't want to see shouldn't be shoved in your face. At the same time, things shouldn't necessarily be taken away from you for your safety, because it very seldom is.
Yeah.
That's very seldom not the reason that you don't have access to certain things. It's more often because for whatever reason other people decide that it's bad or wrong, or that they don't want to see it, and so you can't see it either.
Yeah, if I don't want my kid playing Fortnite because it's a piece of crap game, then I'm going to be creative in my ways to stop him from playing Fortnite. I'm not going to write the local government to be like, you need to make my kid stop playing Fortnite. Just monitor your content. Just look after, what you're getting. If you're not into, like, the lollipop chainsaw genre of games where it's schoolgirl outfits and just really, really weird tentacle stuff going on, then don't play those games. But if you're into that sort of thing and that's what you've got to play, man, like, you go be creepy.
Hey, I like
I like super lollipop chainsaw.
There's no, but I don't think there's any reason that you shouldn't be able to have access to that. Because as a human being, you should be able to regulate what you have access to.
Yeah.
And the responsibility lies upon you of what you have access to, too.
Yeah.
I don't believe in all this, video games made me do it or whatever.
That's the biggest load of crap.
The Beatles made me kill that guy. Okay.
Catcher in a Rye made me kill John Lennon.
it's all about responsibility. You should have the responsibility.
You are your own person. Like you are responsible, regardless of what people tell you. You're responsible for your actions.
Yeah.
Some actions are fantastic. Some actions have consequences. Some actions you should do. Some actions you probably shouldn't. Meth being one of them. Same thing goes with, this whole debacle. I feel like we've kind of rambled a little bit on it, but...
Yeah, we're a bit out of bounds at this point.
Again, this is a very quickly planned podcast.
And
it
now
was
you
not
see.
a very well constructed, but I feel like these are some points that we needed to hit on in order to discuss this topic.
It's a volatile topic.
Yeah, it goes
because it's somewhat at the crux of the human condition. This argument.
Yeah, and it raises the kind of argument. It's hard to talk about this and not mention movies or music or any other form of consumable media. It all kind of ties together. I mean, people don't just play video games. They watch YouTube. They watch TV. They listen to music going down the road. I mean, you're constantly consuming, whether you know it or not, and it's just making sure that you're aware of what you're consuming, and if you're trying to, if you have a certain rule set that you're trying to follow, like you just gotta try to follow it.
You have to maintain your own code. You can't expect anybody to maintain it for you.
Yeah. So, yep. Let's see. Question of the 2 weeks. Let's see.
Well, maybe just feedback on this topic.
Yeah, let us know if you agree with us, if you think we're giant like dirtbags for saying no to censorship.
Where do you think the parameters, the borders are?
Yeah, let us know, man. Women, tentacle monsters.
Okay, now we're
bikini fighters.
Okay. Bye.
Yeah. On that note, we'll see you guys on the next stream. I'm Curtis.
I'm John.
And we're signing out. Peace.
Toodles.